talk.
Hey, 王老师，各位老师，大家好。谢谢，尤其是彭刚老师这么样的费很大的力气 organize 这样的一个 course， 那我们有机会到这边来说，介绍我们自己的研究。那每一次过来的时候，其实也都学到蛮多的。然后透过这个机会的话，可以促进未来的更一起或更多的这个合作这样子。Okay, thank you. Okay, so for my talk today, I'm going to talk about the Chinese character and word processing in the brain. Okay. My name is Wen-Jui from Institute of Neuroscience and Yang-Ming University, Taipei. Okay, when talking about reading or writing from the developmental point of view, we need to consider how it's quite different. Not quite different, it's different from language processing. Because of our language processing, we start from very early of our life, right? At the very beginning of our life. But writing and reading, it starts many years later, maybe 5 or 6 years later. So they are different, but of course there is some overlap between these two faculties. So before I go to the experimental details for the reading experiment, probably we need to have some idea for the language, reading, and the brain. So spoken language is a biological specialization, but written language is largely a cultural invention. Moreover, spoken language is mastered naturally in most all people without direct instruction. You can imagine yourself, right? From the very beginning, I mean, you have an ability to learn language. But reading is very difficult, much difficult than spoken language, and the reading value occurs in large number of our children across all written languages. In every writing system, graphics usually represent information about phonological or morphological features of spoken words, and discovering these correspondence between print and speech is a fundamental task of reading, learning to read. Cross-linguistically speaking, changes along cognitive and neurobiological developmental trajectory would be expected to be common across different writing systems because language processing and reading, they share some commonalities, but they share some, they have some relationship between each other. So, functionally speaking, reading is to discover the phonology and the semantics from the text. So no matter you read Cantonese or I read Chinese, or people read English, so functionally speaking, they are quite similar to each other. So in the brain or from the functional point of view, it can be the case that we would find some similarity or commonality between different writing systems when people are reading them. Another case is from the brain. There is an area called visual form area in the brain, and then this area is a reproducible site of activation during reading in all cultures and in different kind of a writing system. Very similar or very common can be found in each other. No matter you use English, French, Chinese, or other writing systems, always locate at a very similar or same coordinates in the left side, lateral occipital temporal surface, whose lesion can cause pure apraxia and acquire selective disability in reading without agraphia, which activate more to non-script than to other periphery of the visual stimulus. So it's to show it's a specifically sensitive to a reading materials. The higher level visual area is located in the higher level visual area invariant for location and case. Location means where the data or the word project to your retina, and then case means the lower or upper or lower case. It doesn't sensitive to that. It means that it can discover the invariance of the material for reading. And it's a very automatic system capable of activating even to subliminal stimuli. Subliminal means that you cannot consciously aware of, but your perceptual system receives the information. So even though you cannot report what you see, what you have seen, in the scene, but your system to receive the information, and then its effect will occur when you do some relevant task or information processing. And organized as a posterior to anterior hierarchy sensitive to increasingly frequent and the larger fragment of words, later, bigram, trigram, and so on. Okay, so across different written systems, and then when the reader are scanned, during the scan, when they are doing the reading task, this is the area which has been found to be quite consistent and accurate in the brain. Okay, so this is some before my experiment. I briefly introduced some concept or some idea about the reading and language in the brain. And the reading involves a set of accounting processes. The very basic important one is the mapping, the visual form and the phonological form. So this is how we, the major part, we try to recover the phonology from the text, right? So to map the word form orthography onto some patterns phonology. For Chinese, a word can be comprised of, we have one single category, right? Like God, Sen, and two categories, nerve. And what's the third part? It's a 神经, right? Neuron. Okay, it includes three characters to make the word. So therefore, for character and the word in Chinese reading are two basic functional units for processing. It's important to know how they are processed, not only in our mind and the psychological aspect, but also in our brain. You can imagine how how to perceive in the brain. Okay, this is a cover page by a professor on an article, around 20 years ago in the Scientific American. So what I want to say here is about the Chinese character. We need to have no matter how complex or simple the character is, it is you need to arrange all the stroke into a particular space, right? So that's what Chinese character is arranged in the text. And then this is a slide I borrowed from Albert. Can you understand what does it mean? Maybe yes, some people already saw it before, but maybe not for others, you don't see it before. But when you put it together with Chinese character, okay, you can see what does it mean. So here, what I want to say is for Chinese, homophone is everywhere. When you ignore the tone, and then we have many homophones. For some syllable, for some a syllable, it can contain about maybe more than 30 or 40 words. So these are some characteristic of Chinese writing system, especially the range. And then it's a very pervasive homophone, okay, in the writing system. Okay, another feature or another saying has been often considered that Chinese characters are typographic. You see, these are character holds from the very old days up to now with some modern time. So from here, can you see the horse? Or maybe not the parent, right? So not really, right? The answer is not really. But what happened? When you go back to look at the literature, okay, from English, you see, there are graphing to phoneme conversion rules, which can be applied to help reading English. No, even for those words you don't know, for example, like a cat, dog, table, then you know. Brain is a pseudo word. Okay, so there's a way you can map from the graphing to phoneme. But how about Chinese? From the characteristic I just mentioned to you, it's a spatially complex arrangement, and then it has a lot of homophone, right? For example, like this is a mother, right? The character mother. We implicitly decompose the character into it's a subcomponent or component radicals. Like this is a semantic and this is a phonological radicals. And then for this is read. And then of course if you divide it, and then there's a word and there's a cell for semantic and phonological radicals. From phonological point of view, this is the consistent one, right? Because when you ignore the tone and then ma, they are similar, right? But here ma and du, they are inconsistent. So from some from some meta-analysis or some categorization, you can see that some words they are consistent. The phonology of the word, the character is considered as phonological radical, but some are not. But what I want to say is that from here, for English, it's quite, compared to Chinese, it's more consistent. Or of course, there are some irregular in certain words. But compared to Chinese, there are small cases, right? But for Chinese characters, there are a lot of words which are not consistent. But does it mean the case that we don't we don't. Since they are not consistent, but do we really ignore this kind of a information, even they are not consistent? So, do property of component of a character have a systematical interest to this process in Chinese character? Is one question which we can ask. We can design experiment to test if if the process is there. When you go back and take a look from the old days up to more recent times, and then you can see that for the Chinese character can be separated into a couple of categories, right? But the major part is the semantic phonetic part. From the old up to now, when 100 years ago, it has been kind of situation like the semantic phonetic character more than, they occupy more than 90% of the characters. So what's the semantic phonetic character? How to read it? This is a chu, and then chuo, and the chuo, and the jie, and the xi, and so on. So from here, I think you can see that which one is what is the phonological radical? The right side, right? And then the whole character can be pronounced in the chu, chuo, chuo, and the jie, and the xi. So for those characters contain this radical, they are not pronounced in the same way, but some are the same, some are not. So by this way, we can calculate what regularity do we derive, can we derive from the reading experience of Chinese characters. So when we can go back, go to take a look on some corpus, right, and then to calculate, to get all those characters for those characters with the radical here. And then you can calculate how many characters here in this cluster. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There are 6 characters in the cluster. And then how many of them are pronounced in the same way? All of them are pronounced in the same way. They are all pronounced yao. So for this kind of character, it's a so-called high consistent character, which means that it's a phonological radical can consistently 100% correct to provide the phonological information. But for the other set, with this radical, it's quite diverse, right? Some are liu, some are shu, some are yi. So for the character with this phonological radical, they are not completely pronounced in the same way. So some characters from this group, they are inconsistent. So for each character, you can calculate its consistency value based on this type of idea. Okay. So, and then of course, there's another variable you are very familiar with, which is frequency. Some character is a high frequency category, and some are low frequency, means that you make this one this much open than the others. When you on a newspaper, you see some word always, right? Nation and election in Taiwan and blah, blah. So for those characters, they are very open into Israel, but for some, they are quite not open and frequent. But for the phonology, you see there, the sound for these two sets are similar. This is dian, this is also dian. This is bao, this is also bao. This is jia and yao and yao. But it means that phonology is the same, the sound is the same, but the appearance of the character is different. So when you know how to pronounce this character, before that, the process is the same. It can be different, right? So from this kind of manipulation by including the variables like frequency and consistency, we can try to realize when we are reading the Chinese character, what processes are taking place and what happened. And then by including these two variables, we can try to figure out something like a mechanism in the system, how to take care of the reading in Chinese case. When the more frequent character, it is pronounced in a different way compared to the low frequency one. And then if we can see the consistency value change in different way in these two conditions, it's kind of so-called interaction. Right? In psychological interaction can provide you a ground, a base to interpret the mechanism existing there for processing this a Chinese character. Okay, so this is some character, you can get it. This is a high consistent value, and then some are low consistent value. And some are high and some are low. So from the dimension of frequency and consistency, you can sample some characters which are high and low. in these 2 dimensions. So when you construct it as a 2x2 design, in the naming task, it's a very simple one. You present the character centrally on the screen, and the subject just read it as quick as possible when the word hits his eye. And then you recall the naming latency. You just put the microphone in front of the subject. And then when the voice starts, and then the microphone will be activated, and then the trigger the reaction time recording by the computer by the PC. Okay? So this is the behavioral data we record from the subject. There are more than 30 subjects or something. And then this reaction time, and the accuracy is very high, always more than a 90% of the correct rate. So here from the data you can see quite clearly that for the characters of low frequency part, high frequency capture. I mean the naming latency is much faster than the response time of the low frequency captures. Okay, and then there is an interaction for the consistency value. For those are high frequency captures, consistent value is consistent or not, it doesn't matter too much because I made those captures very often. So this kind of frequency effect can make the consistent compromise. So it doesn't matter too much for the high frequency capture if they are consistent or not. I saw it very much, so I can read it anyway. But for the low frequency capture, you are not that familiar with them like the high frequency part. At that time, and then the consistent value does matter at that time. When it's more consistent, and then the naming latency is quicker than those, they are not consistent. What does it mean? It means that frequency is one way to form your process for reading. When you saw the capture very often, and then break it just by many things, right? And then always so, and then you can understand what is sound by association. But we are not we are not a passive system. We are an active system. I mean, for the human system, information power system, you will derive some rules from the evidence accumulated by experience. So you will try to derive some way to minimize your effort. So it's highly possible that you will derive some rules, and then to get some intuitive or some way to provide you some information for reading those characters you are not familiar with. So at that time, after maybe 10 years, or 15 years or 20 years later, and then you have your own rules for reading these characters. So it's just by why when they are not a frequent character and then the high consistent part, they can be named faster than those who are not which are not consistent. Also, this is from the psychological perspective, we interpreted the data that there is a so-called reading mechanism. You shape by yourself from your reading experience. Okay, so we apply these two variables to look at the reading Chinese reading if there's some mechanism for it. So yes, the finding indicate that component properties, the frequency and consistency, a characteristic of the component, can influence its psychological processing in a systematic way. For the logical recording Chinese reading was therefore suggested. Okay, it's their way to help us visualize how reading process proceed in the brain. We would like to know or interested in how these are a reading process. Where in the brain, which networks are more related to this process. Is there a way can help us to do that? Yes. Functional MRI is a neuroimaging technique, a procedure, to depict the neural correlate of some psychological process of interest, especially for our interest of reading, by detecting the change of the blood oxygenation level, because if somewhere in the brain it activates, it means there's some neuron, violated to do the information processing, to pass or to pass the information, transformation, and so on. So, and then it needs some energy consumption. So now the circulation system will do some work to provide the oxygen hemoglobin to provide the metabolic activity and then for the information transformation. So by using fMRI, we are able to look for the neural underpinning of reading. Here, neural activity happens somewhere in the brain. It will cause the hemodynamic response to provide the oxygen hemoglobin and some glucose. And then this effect would be reflected in the fMRI signal. And then from here, we can back project to infer that somewhere, if there is some old information, some fMRI signal changes, we can go back to infer that where the neuronal activity took place. So when you ask the subject to read, and then by this measurement, we can see, oh, okay, where in the brain there is more related to these reading activities. Some very basic technical concept. I know some people, some of you may not be familiar with the fMRI procedures. They're very quick. Okay. So during the MR scanning, for 10 minutes, we just put you in the scanner and then to scan your brain for 10 minutes, for example. And then during scanning, we need to provide you some stimuli to read. At the same time, you are scanning. So we can correlate and connect. When you read, at the time one, you read this picture, right? And then some seconds later, and then you read another one. So can you do it again? How to name it? Tone. And then it disappears. And then another one comes. A couple seconds later, this is a mian. It's 腼腆的腼. And then it's tone again, some tone again. And then this is 勉励的勉. So again, it's athletic, right? This is a very common word, is this tone, and then this is a 勉. And this is not frequent, right? But the phonology is the same. And then this is 勉. But this is much more difficult than this one, right? So what does it mean? It means that visually, you perceive character by character. In your brain, in our brain, we know that some area which are very primary area to be responsible for some primary sensory processing. So for example, there are some sensory activity. For reading, it must happen in the visual area, right, for most people. So neuronally, you can say, okay, there's some activity here and here and here and here in response to those characters when they appear. In the screen. Neuronally, activity happen, and then it will induce some bold response in fMRI data. But because this is sensory activity, so visually, you saw it, and then your visual cortex doesn't feel that they're difficult because you will pass the information up to another area who are more in control for the reading in the sensory part. So in the sensory part, it will be quite similar to each other, but for the more decision-like activity-induced part, this one is much more difficult than that one, at least. So here, the activity, in concept, the activity will be higher. And then in this tone is much less difficult than this one, so this is much tone than this one, right? So after the comparison, when you subtract image here, when you read these characters, you are scanned, the subject are being scanned. So you can find a corresponding relationship between the image and then the character. So you can subtract the images from the easy one from the difficult one. You can subtract the easy one from the difficult one. In that case, what happened? What happened is here for the basic one, they will be subtracted out. They will be cancelled out from each other because this tone is the same tone here, the same tone like in the visual area. But in some more complicated, in some area who are responsible for complicated process, they are not the same, right? Here, this mian is much more complicated or difficult for this mian, maybe in the Broca area, in the Wernicke area, or some more associated area. So in that way, we can have a tool to depict or to decipher some area which can show more something like the frequency effect. If in an area in the brain you find a frequency effect, what's your interpretation? Is it possible that it's more related to the so-called reading process, right? Or That's one way we can interpret it. Okay, so this is some demonstration. Okay, now we try to combine these two kind of approach, behavioral psychological approach, and then the imaging approach. We use fMRI and then try to see the neuronal effect of Chinese reading related to the character frequency, consistency, and the layer interaction. If in the brain, I can find some area which can reflect the interaction. Psychologically speaking, we say, okay, when there's a such interaction, we can say, okay, there is a psychological mechanism to be responsible for this process. On top of that, if in the brain can find an area which can associate or related to this interaction, and we can more, confidently to say, okay, in the brain, it really somewhere, it's really somewhere in the brain, it's a responsible for this mechanism, and then we can, it will show us more direct evidence for the neurologically based. So this is we collect the data from the 3D MRI, and then we have 18 subjects, college students. These are the naming tasks. And the frequency and consistency are the two independent variables for manipulation. So this is a naming task. Okay, again, try to do some introduction to the setup. Before fMRI study, you need to recruit some subject, of course, and then you need to have a machine where you can go to do experiments. So this is one MRI machine we can get access to, and then this is a subject. Before getting to the MRI, you need to change the process, because not only the subject need to be protected, also the MRI need to be protected, because they are very vulnerable to some medical stuff. So either way, we need to protect the subject, we need to protect the machine. So we need to do something in advance to prevent all those dangerous event or activity. So when subject lie down there, there's a head coil, and then we put the head coil on there. It's very important that from psychological perspective, you need to have a device, MRI compatible device, to record the subject response. In that way, you can monitor, you can suggest, you can understand that if the subject lying there who are, really pay attention to the task. From the behavioral data, behavioral performance, you can see, okay, he's now 100% of awareness. If you see the behavioral data is only, the accuracy is 20%. What do you think? Maybe the subject falls asleep. He doesn't pay too much attention to the task. He's thinking about what he's doing later after the scanning, because you will get 500 scan fee. Maybe for the lunch or dinner, you can have a big lunch afterwards. Right? So you need to prepare and then to instruct the subject very, very carefully. You say, okay, you are I will be very, very kind to you. I just want you to help. And then in that way, to persuade him to help you. Okay, another point of view is this is an MRI scanner. And then this is a terminal. This is the back side of the scanner. Here, there is a filter. And then this is the outside of the scanner from here. So this is the projector. From the projector, we can hook up with the computer to, for example, if you use the E-prime representation, for the software to design your program, and then you can project your stimuli from here, and then go through the terminal, go through the filter, and you project here. When the image of the character being projected here, there is a screen. Subject line in there, right? In there. So from the back side, here, this is the back side, and then when subject line here, from the reflection mirror, you can see the image being projected by the projector on the screen. But this is another experiment example. Here we present some facial expression, some face stimuli with emotion, and then subject can see it from the screen here. So in that way, you can record, you can project, and then subject can see, can respond to your stimulus. Also, this is the fMRI setting to give a very general concept of it. Okay, in the scan, the subject responds naming covertly to the stimuli when we present to them one by one. So we have a cluster of character, which is high frequency and low frequency. Just like I mentioned to you that for the low frequency part, it may induce more activity for some higher processing a process. Okay. So when we subtract the information, the image of the high frequency part from the low frequency part, we can see which area in the brain show higher activity for the low frequency in comparison to the high frequency one. So from here you see that many areas in the brain are activated, right? So now we can carefully to inspect what happens, why this area can be associated with the so-called frequency effect. Psycholinguistically speaking, when we say for frequency effect in reading, it may reflect kind of some more like a lexical assets, right, for phonological processing and so on in the reading system. But when you look in the brain, not only the higher area, like a Broca, like a Wernicke area, or like some way the supramarginal area, and so on, but also the ventral stream going up from the visual cortex and then the ventral stream bilaterally, they are involved. But what does dorsal stream? I mean, the major role from the textbook, it tells us that the dorsal stream, or the visual stream, I mean, it's more responsible, more about the process of visual spatial analysis. It tells us where the object you are looking for is. Where and then what's the relationship between A and B when you analyze this kind of information from the visual object or something, and then it retrieves a lot of dorsal stream activation or activity for that. What's the role of the ventral stream? It tells us that when you want to know what is the object you are looking at, so it's sort of the what pathway. So where pathway, also the where pathway and or the ventral, the what pathway are activated at the same time for the frequency effect. What does it mean? To me, it means that probably when we are looking at the character which we are not familiar, we spend more effort to look at, to analyze the relationship between the component or between the source. And also it therefore cause the higher effort for the ventral part as well, to combine the relationship of the analysis and then to make it as to help us to recognize it. So from the ventral and dorsal visual stream, probably it tells us that to recognize a character based on the frequency variation, it doesn't have only those higher level, but also those very basic analysis, visual analysis stream pathway as well. Okay, we also see some area in the inferior frontal and superior temporal activation. Inferior frontal here, and then inferior parietal here, left side, and then superior temporal activation here. So these are more related to the classic and the language area. And we also see some subcortical activation here, the thalamus and caudate, and so a lot of subcortical activation. It might suggest the possibility that to calculate information for the low frequency characters for phonological phonology and so on are activated more for in this case. So from here, the frequency effect, I mean, from imaging data suggests us that maybe to process the low frequency characters include not only those higher level processing, but also some perceptual information processing pathway to work on that. Okay. In one more step, the frequency, the interaction part. Behaviorally, we said, okay, for the high frequency characters, consistency is very important. But for low frequency characters, consistent or not, it does matter. The high consistent part will cause higher, quicker naming latency. So suggested by this interaction, we subtract between these two categories. There is when you say for the high frequency character, the low consistency character and the high consistency character, there is nothing different. But in another way, in another contrast, for low frequency character, when you subtract the high consistent part from the low consistent part, it activates a lot, including the bilateral ceiling feature area, which are the area very associated very much with the phonological auditory information analysis. And then some area, the left side premotor extending down to the inferior frontal gyrus, so-called Broca area, which are the very core area for the phonological analysis as well. And then some area in the thalamus, and then the medial side of the motor or the prefrontal cortex, SMA down to the ACC anterior cingulate cortex. So what I want to say is, do you remember the first slide or the second slide? We say, okay, brain, language, reading, and brain. So in the brain, we see some area which show this is a reading task. Relate a lot to those are a language networks. So it means that there is some relation to be connected, in order to construct the phonology, and then they need to be contact or relate to each other in this task. Okay, so there are those brain area they consider a network to work for the transformation from orthography to phonology. I mean to construct the phonology. It's a highly connected with those language network. Okay, from here we show you that by combining the psychological approach and then the imaging technique, we can see not only the psychological process, but also those areas in the brain which are responsible for those process. This is the first part I would like to show you. Okay, in the second part, we are trying to look at the character and word processing differences. More than 3 decades ago, again, it has been behaviorally demonstrated by using a T-score representation to the 2 visual hemispheres and show hemisphere processing asymmetry for transcharacter and words. This work has been published in Nature by Ovid and Wang Laoshi 34 years ago. The Nature finding is when the word presents to the left visual field, the right hemisphere, there is a left visual field advantage for processing single character. And then there's another side of advantage for processing 2 character words. What does it mean? It means, okay. Another purpose for this study is that can we use fMRI to help to delineate transcharacter word processing in the two hemispheres. What I want to introduce, before I go into the experiment, I want to introduce some more basic concepts. Right, hemisphere specialization or lateralization. It's well known that the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere may feature different ways of information processing. I think it's not trivial because this kind of a concept has been accumulated for many years. But the true face is not clear yet. But I mean, it's really something like the left hemisphere. It's highly it's quite sensitive to the rational processing, analytical part, and then sequential and logic and linguistics. From patient study, from many other aspects of the evidence, it shows this kind of a trend. On the right side, it's more emotional, holistic, parallel, humorous, and silent, and so on. So there are 2 kind of information processing a dichotomy. So for the left side, it's more sensitive to this kind of information processing. On the right side, is more for this part. From the task, we know that some tasks require this kind of processing more than the others. Some tasks requires it more on this part than the other part. So you can see that for reading number skill, the reading, written language, or reading, reasoning, spoken language, verbal response, and then so on. For those tasks, it shows that more involvement for the left hemisphere. The other side, for the introspection, the more spatial, a 3D forms, and then art, creativity, imagination, and the music, and so on. They rely more on the right hemisphere. I mean, of course, the task is one thing. Processing away, information processing is another thing. For some tasks, it can require more on this part, but also some from here. So it's not the kind of absolute that one task requires only some process from here, but not there. So I mean, these are some idea in advance before I go to the experiment. Okay, now from the anatomy point of view, this is a dorsal view, and then this is anterior, posterior. So you said this is left hemisphere, right hemisphere, frontal and occipital, parietal here, temporal. This is lateral view. This is anterior, posterior, here temporal cortex, frontal and occipital, here parietal here. This is the medial side. When you separate the brain, you see here, this is a hippocampus. So actually, it seems like there are two hemispheres. Of course, we have two hemispheres in the brain, but they are not independent because there's some structure in between here. There's a corpuscle to connect the two hemispheres. From the architecture of the visual system, I mean, very simple scheme to do. So from here, you see, in the outside world, you can see the left hemisphere and right hemisphere. And in each eye, you can receive both left and right. You can receive both left and right. So for the information from the left, you will go to your right hemisphere. For the information from the right hemisphere, right visual field, you go to the left hemisphere. So you see, okay, so this is a very best, information, a trajectory, transmission or transformation of the pathways. But based on this part, the corpuscle, it can connect information between the two hemispheres. So its job is to communicate information transmitted from the two hemispheres. It takes about 10 to 20 milliseconds to go from left to the right. It therefore undermines the clarity of hemispheric specialization or hemispheric symmetry. So it's not clear that on the left side, the right side, there is specialization. You can easily to find in the past because this kind of architecture, it will complicate all the pictures. So, but in some case, it will show the hemispheric asymmetry or hemispheric specialization. For the case of split brain patient, some patient, for example, like an epileptic patient, if they have some seizure very serious in the left hemisphere, which can transmit it to the right side, and it will cause a very bad, serious consequence. So sometime after the evaluation, the corpus callosum will be removed, will be cut, be separate for those patients. Okay, so for the split brain patient, it has been demonstrated that the right hemisphere do show a certain amount of linguistic stability. For example, this is a surgery to remove the scalp and then to cut the corpus callosum to some extent. But actually, from here, the corpus callosum can be in general separated into three parts. For the first third, it will mostly connect the frontal part. And then for the middle part, it connects the parietal and temporal. And then for the last, the posterior last third part, it connects the visual part. Okay. But for some patients, the seizure is very serious, and then it will be cut completely. So the left and right hemisphere cannot communicate. With this structure. And then this is the experimental design, experimental setup. This patient has been separated. It's a corpus callosum. So there is a screen which can block its eye. So the patient cannot see through the screen. And then after after the screen, there are some objects. There are some objects there. Okay, subject, the patient's right hand was put under the table, and then the left hand was put, on the table. Subject fixed on the fixation here, and then in this kind of a setup, we can present briefly the stimuli to the left visual field or the right visual field. Afterward, you can ask the patient to touch, no matter they can see, they can read the character, they can read the word or not. They just require to pick up one of the objects he thinks it should be correspond to what he saw. So here the patient said, I don't see anything when there is a word being projected on the screen. Because from here you see that the left hemisphere, the word would be projected to the right hemisphere, right? From the left visual field, projected to the right hemisphere. But the right hemisphere, because of the remove of the corpusculum, it cannot be transferred to the left side. So verbally, the subject, he cannot report what he saw from the screen. But actually, when he was asked to touch or to pick up the object, he think may have some relationship with the character word. Even he doesn't say it, and then he pick up the ball with his left hand. Left hand is controlled by the right hemisphere. So it means that the right hemisphere seems to have a certain amount of linguistic ability. Otherwise, his left hand controlled by the right hemisphere cannot touch the right one. So from the split brain patient, it seems that the right hemisphere, after this patient doesn't look like a kid, right? So it's a dog. So after a lot of experience accumulated afterward, and then when it's a big cut, the right hemisphere has developed some linguistic ability. Okay, so this is some introduction before I go to the experiment here. Again, okay, so when we come back, you see, we would like to look for the processing difference of the character and word in the two several hemispheres. This is the work by Ovid and the Professor Wang. And then this visual hemisphere with the physical presentation. Character and word identification, they use the naming task. When you saw the character, the subject had naming. So this is a naming task, identification. They found that a single character word has a left hemisphere, left visual field, right hemisphere advantage. The right hemisphere, it processes the single character with a much more beneficial effect from here. Two character word, there's a right visual field, left hemisphere advantage for the two character words. So it's the evidence is very clear cut. But afterward, the hemisphere asymmetry in processing character and word, so that this kind of conclusion. However, for character processing, many years ago, some people say, okay, the effect is not as stable. And then some people try to examine the word length effect in English using Chinese word, and they don't find this effect. And they say, okay, maybe the story is not that solid. So it inspires us to re-examine, the experience. But before that, we have some a discussion about the paradigm. Okay. So and also can FMR help to delineate this difference in the brain. Before the experiment, we say, okay, you can unilaterally present or bilaterally present the stimuli to the subject. What's the difference? There is a bunch of research done by both from 1983 up to 1995 to discuss the unilateral presentation and the bilateral presentation. Which way can be more stable to show the bilateral spatialization or those are a lateralization effect. Unilaterally, we present here the character on the left side and on the right side, one at a time. Bilaterally present the two characters at the same time. Bilaterally to the left visual field and the right visual field. But you provide a cue for the subject to process only the right or the left. So the central cue provides the key information to show you which is the target for you to process. What happened? I mean, what's the sequence? What's the course of this kind of a presentation? Wait, in the left hemisphere, when it's character on the right side, right, you go to the left hemisphere. The right homologue area, it's quite often you see that the right homologue or the left homologue, I mean, they can serve quite similar a function. So when you present to the right side, the left visual cortex is a bit activated, but the right side can help because of the corpus callosum. In the other way, I mean, at the very beginning, I mean, so this is we need to have a very brief presentation. So you ask the subject to present centrally, and then the captain presented maybe 100 or millisecond, less than 200 milliseconds. And for the bilateral part, when these two captains are simultaneously present on the left and right side, and then those two areas are occupied at the same time. But centrally, you provide a cue to tell the subject, okay, the right captain is the target. You should ignore the left side, the left side. But physically, anatomically, this part area is being occupied by the non-target. So it creates a situation to enhance the specialization. If this area is specialized more for a process, and then because the resource this part is being occupied, and then so the difference between the cerebral difference for the information process will be enhanced. There is no help from the other side. So it will increase the difference of the processing, and which will increase the chance, opportunity to realize the specialization of the information of interest. So in this way, because of corpus callosum, homologue area in left and right hemisphere may serve similar functions. Better control is to inhibit or occupy neuronal support from the non-target site. Bilateral presentation can help preventing or minimize this variation from the individual. So it can increase the stability of the paradigm to detect the difference of the information of the information you are interested in. Okay, in the first experiment, we want to see is the processing trans single character in the left and in the left visual field and the right visual field. We present this. Okay, so you know what I'm doing, right? Okay, two variables are manipulated: the visual field, left side or right side, and then we increase the frequency, a variation frequency as a variable to manipulate from low, medium, and high frequency levels. So in the trial, two characters were simultaneously bilaterally present for 150 milliseconds in the left and right. The target character was interpreted by a central cue embedded in the same presentation frame. And then 150 milliseconds later, subject need to this is let's call decision task. Subject need to decide if the character is a real character or not. Of course, half trials, they are not real characters. But a little bit very quick. Okay, for the stimuli to be presented on the left and right, and if the target is a character, we also control that the distractor is a character on all the non-character. So in that way, subject cannot strategically aware when I saw character or non-character, and then there is another systematic way people can expect. So this kind of arrangement, and when target is a non-character, no trial is the same. So it counterbalance. I mean, we also counterbalance the list between subjects, and we also counterbalance the left and right side response, right hand and left hand. Half subject, they use their right hand to push it forward, character. They use left hand to push it for non-character, right? The other half subject, they change. So we can counterbalance because we are looking at the brain response, the left side, and then the effector can be a very important factor to be contaminated if we don't counterbalance them. The result. This is so we can have their subjects. This is a behavioral study only, not getting to the fMRI yet. Behavior, we see, okay, left side, left visual field / right hemisphere. Right visual field presentation and left hemisphere, the indication, okay? And then this is the accuracy, and then the blue bar is a high frequency capture. The red bar is a median, and then the green bar is a low frequency. The white bar is the average of those information together. So here you can see that in average, the left visual field accuracy is higher than the right visual field. So this is a left visual field, right hemisphere advantage for the accuracy, for the capture. So we replicate previous study result. And then you see, from the frequency and manipulation, high frequency is higher, and then median lower, and then lower frequency is lower, more. This is very robust. It helps us to check that, okay, our data should be quite reliable, because this fit everybody's expectation. High frequency, more, accuracy higher, and then so on. For reaction time, you can see, okay, this is left visual field, right hemisphere, right visual field, left hemisphere. Okay. In general, we see the reaction time from the left visual field, right hemisphere, left visual field, right hemisphere is quicker, faster than the other side. Again, we replicate previous study in this, in single character level. And then frequency effect also shows significant, but I don't know why this part. The right go to left, so left hemisphere was for single character is not as stable, right? So it doesn't do a good job there. But for the left hemisphere, right hemisphere, left visual field, right hemisphere, it did a very good job for the single character recognition. We follow, for the frequency effect, those very, fit our expectation. So this is a statistic. Okay, one significant left visual field, right hemisphere advantage for positive size single character was revealed from the data, as I showed. Okay, from the second, these are Chinese two character words in the left and the right. So again, we have a visual field variable, frequency again, from high, medium to low. And then we simultaneously bilaterally present Q to show which one is the target. And then we counterbalance the hand, and we counterbalance the order, the stimuli. Okay. Again, so for the result, for the accuracy here, you see, in general, the right-left visual field right hemisphere is a 0.82, and 0.86 for the right visual field left hemisphere. Accuracy is higher for the left side already. Right hemisphere is not okay. Compared to the right hemisphere or the two character word. This part is still higher performance. For the reaction time data, in general, you see here, it's quicker for the two character word in the left hemisphere, faster than the character presented to the right side. For the processing. And then you see the frequency effect, right? Very, very beautiful. The trend beautifully a fit to what you would expect. Okay, so the significant right side, right visual field left hemisphere advantage for processing Chinese two character words. So this is very precisely a replicate previous studies a data pattern. So up to now, what do you think? So now the data, the character for English one, English, they show, for the English word, they show the right visual field, left hemisphere advantage. But for our Chinese character, at the single character, You can think about it when I prepare my machine, and then I come back in a minute. So there's still another experiment, and then before I showed it, and then you can guess what's the main manipulation I have this time. If we like to integrate information from a single and then a two category, the two experiments I show you, the data coming from two groups of subjects, so they are different. So now in order to compare, to integrate the information for the a single character and two character word, it's better to have a within subject design. From the same brain, you see the single character left visual field, right hemisphere advantage for capture, and then two character, right visual field, left hemisphere advantage for two categories. If the data come from the same subject, it will be more robust to say, okay, it's true. Okay, so this is the purpose of the third experiment. Process tries one character and two character word in the lab and the within subject design. Also, we incorporate. By the way, so last time in Taiwan, I showed the data to some people here. At that time, I just finished. The progress is on what in the second experiment on the hardware. But after a couple of months later, we finished the behavioral part. So we finished the two words part and then the third experiment. From the accuracy data, the left side is one character, the right side is two character word. You see the pattern is reversed. For the blue bar is left present in the left visual field right hemisphere. The right bar is right visual field left hemisphere. For one character stimuli, it goes this way. The left visual field advantage there. On the two character side, the left visual field is worse than the right visual field. It's a left hemisphere advantage for two characters. This is within subject design. So for one subject, at the first hour, he did the one character part, and then the second hour he did the two character part. The half of the subject we changed the order. So 1, 2, and the other one is 2, 1 character. Okay. So we separate them. This is overall summary for the accuracy data, and this is average. In average, you see that one character is lower, and the two character is higher performance. So one and two character, of course, there's not much difference, but I mean, your eye can very, very quickly pick up the information. Okay. When you separate the 1 and 2 into more details, you can see the pattern is exactly the same, not the same, similar to what we found in the first study for the one character part. Here, this is a high, median, and low, high, median, and low. And this is the left visual field, and this is right visual field. So this one higher than this part, the left visual field advantage. The right side is for the two character part. Okay. So there are 36 subjects. Okay, left visual field, right advantage for one character processing. We found it. Right visual field advantage for two character word. This part. Within subject, we show the same pattern. Frequency effect is the same in this interaction between the two, because we try to integrate information from one character with the two character part. So within subject design allow us to do this integration and analysis, right? So we analyze the data with a 2 by 2 by 3 ANOVA within subject a model. The first two is 1 and 2 character. The second two is a left and right visual field. The third 3 is the high, median, and low frequency levels. Okay, so it's short. Frequency effect is the same in the left and right visual field for a single character. Frequency effect is the same here. These two parts, it's quite similar. Almost not the difference is almost nothing. But the frequency effect is larger for the two character world in the left visual field, right hemisphere. Right visual field, left hemisphere. So here, left visual field, right hemisphere, the frequency effect is larger. significantly larger than the right visual field left hemisphere. Okay, this is a reaction time data, but sorry, accuracy data. Okay, and then because this is there is a significant interaction here, so we calculate the effect size for frequency for the two character side. So the effect size is larger for the left visual field right hemisphere, and the right visual field left hemisphere, or this effect size larger than for the right and then smaller for the left. This reaction time data, we show the same pattern, right? For one, this is a left visual field right hemisphere, right visual field left hemisphere. Yeah. So what do we have here? Quicker for the one character in the left side, right? So right visual field advantage, and then this is a left visual field advantage for the two character part. And this is a frequency effect. So what we found is the left visual field right hemisphere advantage for one character processing again, and then right visual field advantage for the two character processing again. Frequency effect is the same in the left and right visual field for single character also. Mirror the finding of the accuracy. Frequency effect is larger in the left side visual field for the two characters than in the right side. So here we have a bigger frequency effect in the left visual field, I mean on the right side, right hemisphere. Okay, the effect size is larger for this part and smaller for that part. So what does our result suggest? Okay, the result of the third experiment replicate result of the experiment 1 and 2, especially the within subject design allowed us to interpret the result as follows. First, for the left visual field right hemisphere advantage of the one character condition, it indicates that at single character level, the Chinese character do need more visual spatial analysis for decomposition or integration. So that's why the left visual field advantage for one character condition. Frequency effect in one character condition may include both lexical and perceptual level analysis. Therefore, there is no difference for both the left and the right visual field presentation. What does it mean? It means that high and low frequent character in the left and the right visual field, it doesn't matter too much. Because for the single character in the left visual field, it will be presented to the right hemisphere, right? And then for the familiar one, of course, it can be processed quicker. But because this is a lexical decision task, the frequency effect, I mean, in the left and the right, frequency effect means the difference between the high and low frequency. This is a subtraction, that's a relative value. This relative value doesn't change in the left and in the right. It means that both at a single character level, the lexical processing, the perceptual processing, these two processing can be measured in the left and right. But these two, the difference between these two, for the single character, it doesn't matter. I mean, the difference are not significant. But for two character words, frequency for right visual field left hemisphere advantage for the two character condition, it indicates that it relies more on the left visual field, left hemisphere's contribution. What's the major contribution of the left hemisphere? It's more linguistic, more analytical analysis. So if the two character words, the two character condition, it needs more this kind of information, and then the frequency effect is larger in the left visual field, right hemisphere, because the right hemisphere is something like a dyslexic. It's not that expert in the analytical part, but for the two character words, it needs more the analytical linguistic analysis. So when it present to the right hemisphere, project to the left, the right visual field, project to the left hemisphere, the frequency effect is not that much, not that larger like when it present to the left, being going to the right hemisphere. So this kind of interaction can be revealed, or this is my interpretation. Okay. So this verification 30 years later to this work, and then, okay? And then, I'm sorry that because my title of my talk is setting up to look at the neural part, but the fMRI data collection is on the halfway. We finished the one character part, but the subject are recruited back for the two character part. So I expect and I hope that I can present you the data next time for the imaging part. Okay, this is my talk today. Thank you.
Let's take the opportunity to ask some questions.
It's a very good question. It's a very nice talk. Sorry. When you talk about the one character versus the two characters, people say the examples. It's a verb you use or the nouns you use. But an example like the following, so what you handle is like my, buy, and read, to read, right?
读
读 right? Yeah. 我昨天买和读了一本书。That's one character, my and also you have two characters corresponding to my, like 购买 and do with 阅读 right? You also can say 昨天我购买和阅读了一部字典 yeah. However, the first sentence is ungrammatical and the second is grammatical, acceptable. Number one. Number two, 买 and 购买 are two different forms linguistically.
Okay.
And I don't know how to handle this. And the effect may be caused by the differences between the one syllable word, monosyllable word in Chinese, and the two syllable disyllabic word. So I'm just wondering how to handle the things like that.
I didn't. Thank you for the question. We didn't exactly control the grammatical feature of the word you just mentioned. But we just for the characters we sample them from the corpus from the academic in Taiwan. Then there's a corpus by Hong-Jui and Lao-Si. And then we just list the frequency, and then of course some from this part single. Okay, we control their frequency because we have a different frequency group, right? And then we control their we manipulate the frequency, but we control their consistency, but we don't control the synthetic part. And then for the two character word, we do have some manipulation or control. For example, like for the word, the two character word we use, they are all share the same character. For example, like 花园 and the 花痴. Sorry, 花园 and the 花. They are what I want to do is the same set. We can extract high frequency, medium, and low. But also, again, we didn't control the synthetic characteristics I mentioned.
Yeah, just one more sentence.
Yeah.
Probably would like to consider. It's not purely syntactic. It's a stylistic.
Okay.
It's a register. So in other words, some disyllabic forms you don't use in everyday speech. And even if we are used frequently in, for example, newspaper or informal occasions, that's something I would like to say. If your study can show some effect of this register differences.
Okay, we'll go back to check the material. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, please.
Thank you for your talk. My question is about your design of your material in the two character words session. I know in your one character session, your material is character versus pseudo character. And my question is, in the two character session, is the pseudo part
Pseudo words.
the pseudo words or the pseudo words are consists of two pseudo characters or real characters?
In the second experiment, the non-word consists of two real characters. We just switch the order.
Oh.
Yeah, we just rearrange the characters combination to make it as a non-word.
Questions? Okay, if you want to give it the time, I run out of time. So next time, speak again.
Thank you.
大导演的台，我就说
就是所有的，对对应该的，但是就是如果是我们正好是看你正在研究那个专业，就会不好。但是下雨的话，下雨经常下，对吧？你比如我是我好像只有明天下午下，我就是我可以做，但是新华的学生那个对呀，尽量对，因为有时候会不好，其实来上班还有这样的，因为是说明明天还有后来就水天下我觉得你对我们的现在是看一下这个它有很多电子的，音乐或者说另外像信号那个然后把其中的有一些人力的但是如果你再发出来，还要再对对对，第一次讲心理上应对学的比较这个这今年的